Most women never see it coming, until it's far too late. He doesn't leave with rage. He doesn't burn bridges. In fact, he still shows up at dinner, still kisses the child goodnight. But something in his eyes is gone, and no matter how much you plead, cry, or scream, his soul is somewhere else, somewhere she now lives. The third person, the forbidden woman, the one who didn't build with him but awakened something ancient within him, the one who didn't earn loyalty through years of service, but who, in a single glance, unearthed the parts of him even he didn't know he buried. You wonder, how can a man love another in a way he never loved the woman who bore his children, shared his burdens, honored his name? Because love, real love, archetypal, obsessive, chaotic love, is not logical. It is not fair. It is not built. It is unleashed. A man does not fall in love with the third person because she is better. He falls because she holds the mirror to the part of himself that his wife could never touch, the part he denied, the shadow, the anima, the wild, unruly, unconscious he was too afraid to bring into his sacred marriage. Carl Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But transformation requires chaos, risk, fire. The wife in many marriages becomes the structure, the fortress. She is duty, devotion, identity. But the third person, she is disruption. And it is often the soul, not the ego, that hungers for disruption. He doesn't love her more. He feels more through her. And that distinction, though cruel, is critical. And then she arrives of yourself, she his unconscious, he his fact, and suddenly he is no longer safe, but alive. The wife may have offered security, but the third person becomes his reflection, the forbidden mirror. She does not coddle the man, she confronts the boy. She exposes the aching truth. He has never truly been seen, and in seeing, she becomes myth. Not a woman, but an experience. Do you understand what that does to a man who has lived years behind walls? It's not about the affair. It's not about sex. It's not about comparison. It's about the projection of the inner feminine, what Jung called the anima. The anima is not rational. She is dream, illusion, instinct, chaos, soul. And when a man does not consciously integrate her, he seeks her violently, blindly, destructively, outside of himself. Often in women who stir what he has lost, his feeling function, his creativity, his vulnerability. The third person often embodies not just desire, but the man's unlived life. You may hate her, you may call her names, but she is not the threat you think she is. She is simply the key to a door that was already there, hidden behind years of marriage, expectation, and suppression. But what about you? What does it mean to be the wife left with questions, ghosts, and rage? It means you were never less. It means you were never boring. It means he was never whole. You were the container, but he never poured in his truth. You were the home, but he never brought all his furniture. You were sacred, but he was fractured. Some men do not lose love because they were betrayed. They lose it because they never became conscious enough to receive it. The third person does not teach him about her, she teaches him about himself. And often it is not the wife he leaves, but the man he cannot bear to be anymore. So where does that leave you, woman of the hearth, keeper of legacy? It leaves you with fire. Not the burning kind that scorches your self-worth, but the kind that alchemizes grief into gold. You are not unloved, you are unmirrored. You are not abandoned, you are reborn. Because the woman who knows herself does not compete with fantasy. She becomes the storm. She becomes the silence he cannot conquer. She becomes what he was too afraid to reach for in you. But it hurts, doesn't it, to know you gave your body, your loyalty, your best years, only to be replaced not by someone better, but by someone unknown. A woman who didn't carry the weight, didn't earn the trust, didn't stay through the long winters of your life together. And yet, he longs for her. You ache, not because he betrayed you, but because you never got to be her. Not once did you get to be the dream, the fantasy, the wildfire. You were always the anchor. The one who reminded him of bills, of promises, of reality. The one who told him no when he wanted to escape. The one who gave him a mirror that reflected duty, not desire. But this is the ancient tragedy of womanhood, that to be chosen for stability is so often to be forgotten for passion. And yet, what if you knew that the passion he seeks is not sustainable, not sacred, not sovereign? Because here's what he doesn't understand, not yet. The third person awakens him, yes, but she cannot hold him. She cannot carry his weight. She mirrors his wound, not his destiny. You, You were his container, his ground, his safe place to collapse. But he did not know how to honor that. Because most men have not been taught that safety can be sexy, that devotion can be divine, that a woman who chooses him day after day is not mundane, she is mythic. But he was taught by the world that fire matters more than foundation, that the thrill of the new is worth more than the soul of the familiar, that hunger is truth and peace is weakness. And so he follows the woman who stirs him. But you, who now sit with the absence of his presence, you are holding something even more sacred, the invitation to return to yourself. You see, it's not just men who project their inner anima onto others. Women too lose themselves in the roles they think will keep love. You became the mother, the nurturer, the rational one. You tucked away your mystery, your erotic power, your wildness so he would stay. You chose being needed over being desired. And now, you wonder why he runs toward a woman who doesn't carry his burdens. But the question is, why did you carry them in the first place? Who taught you that, to be loved, you had to disappear? The wife who gave too much, too soon, too completely, is not weak. She is ancient. She is the archetype of the great mother, the one who nourishes all but forgets herself. But the woman who rises from betrayal, she is the dark goddess. She is Kali. She is Lilith. She is the part of you that doesn't beg to be chosen, but remembers she is the prize. And here is the alchemy. Once you stop trying to become the fantasy he ran to, you become the force he can never outrun. Because the third person may haunt his dreams, but the awakened woman haunts his soul. He will learn. Slowly, painfully, he will realize that the woman who sees his shadow but chooses to love him anyway is rarer than the one who only mirrors his fire. He will come to understand that desire without depth is a prison dressed as paradise, that running from peace leads only to exhaustion, that the woman who stayed through the darkness was not boring. She was braver than him. But by then, you will be gone, not necessarily physically, but emotionally, spiritually, archetypally, gone. Because once a woman reclaims her worth, she doesn't wait for closure. She becomes it. She doesn't try to understand the man who left. She outgrows the version of herself who tolerated it. And perhaps he will return, not because he finally sees you, but because he no longer recognizes himself. And maybe, just maybe, you won't answer the door, because the third person was never the reason he strayed. She was just the excuse. The truth is, he was never taught to worship a woman who stands in her full feminine power. He was only ever taught to fear her. Now he will have to face her. And you will have to become her. Hang, you will have to become her. But becoming her is not as simple as dressing differently, speaking softer, or flirting harder. No. Becoming her requires descent into the underworld, into the silence you've avoided, into the room you've kept locked, the one filled with your unspoken rage, your stolen girlhood, your repressed sensuality, and your ancient sorrow. This isn't about revenge. It isn't about making him miss you. It's about meeting the parts of yourself he never bothered to know. It's about realizing that your love was not wasted. It was misplaced. Because you gave from a wound, not from wholeness. You tried to mother a man who needed to father himself. You offered him divinity, but he could only see domesticity. You burned your sacred fire to warm his cold detachment, not knowing that a man who cannot meet his own shadow will always run from the woman who reflects it. And you, in your longing to be loved, became smaller, softer, safer, until you were no longer a woman, but a ghost of who you used to be. Now is the time to resurrect her, the version of you before betrayal, before the marriage swallowed your laughter, before the mirror stopped recognizing your face, the one who danced without waiting to be watched, the one who said no without guilt, the one who seduced life itself, not just a man. This is what Jung meant by individuation, the becoming of the whole self, not the half that serves, sacrifices, and soothes, but also the half that screams, stings, and seduces, the half that feels rage without apology, the half that doesn't need to be liked, only to be true. You don't need to win him back. You need to win you back, because the woman he left behind was never incomplete. She was merely asleep. And the pain he gave you? That was the alarm clock. Let it wake you. Let it wake the version of you who doesn't beg for scraps of attention, the one who does not shrink to accommodate his wounds, the one who understands that being chosen is not the same as being cherished. Let it wake the woman who realizes that the love she gave away was always meant to be returned to herself. Because what if he did you a favor? What if this betrayal was sacred? What if the other woman wasn't your enemy, but your initiation? Into what? Into power. Into discernment. Into the kind of presence that no longer entertains the emotionally unavailable, the spiritually fragmented, the half-awake man still hunting his anima in younger bodies and fleeting highs. The truth is, when he left you for her, he thought he was choosing freedom. But real freedom doesn't lie in escaping one woman for another. Real freedom lies in facing one's own shadow, in integrating the anima within, in becoming whole before trying to merge with another soul. He wasn't ready for that, and maybe you weren't either. Until now. Now you know. Now you know that your power was never in being needed, but in being irreplaceable. Not because you're the only one who stayed, but because you're the only one who saw him and still loved him. And he may never find that again, but by the time he realizes it, you'll have already evolved beyond his reach. Because when a woman rises from the ashes of betrayal, she does not return to who she was. She becomes untouchable. Not bitter, but boundaried. Not cold, but clear. Not heartless, but holy. And the third person? She becomes irrelevant, because she was never the root, only the symptom, only the mirror to the void he refused to fill on his own. You were not replaced. You were revealed, as too deep for a shallow man, as too awake for a sleeping soul, as too whole for someone addicted to fragments. And now it is your soul that whispers, enough. Enough giving from emptiness. Enough chasing men who don't chase their healing. Enough shrinking into roles that diminish your fire. Now, you return to your throne, not to rule over him, but to reign over yourself. But thrones are not made of gold, not the real ones. The throne you return to is forged from your own bones, every part of you that was broken in silence, every piece of you that wept without witness, every moment you stood alone in a room built for two. This is not a victory parade, this is a reclamation. Because when a woman rises, it's not with the intent to be adored. It's with the knowing that she is sovereign. You begin to see what was once invisible. You start noticing the shape of your own voice, the way it shifts when you're no longer performing love. You begin to remember the rhythm of your body without the weight of his absence pulling it into gravity. There is a silence that arrives after heartbreak. Not the silence of despair, but the silence of clarity. He never saw you. He saw a role, a function, a familiar script, and you, out of love or duty or fear, played it well. You smiled when you were empty. You gave when you were exhausted. You stayed when your soul begged for flight. But no more. Now, you see him clearly too. Not as the man you begged to understand you, but as the boy who never understood himself. The boy who confused validation with intimacy, pursuit with purpose. The boy who ran toward the third person because facing his own wounds terrified him more than losing you ever could. He loved her not because she was more, but because she was less known, less real, less woven into his reflection. And sometimes it is easier to chase a mystery than it is to sit in the presence of a woman who has already decoded you. But that's not love. That's projection. That's fantasy built on denial. Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And that is what he did. He called her fate, when in truth she was a flare from the unconscious, a signal of everything he refused to integrate. She was not salvation, she was seduction in the language of unresolved trauma. She was the muse his unhealed self mistook for medicine. But you were the mirror. And mirrors terrify the fragmented. Because the moment you reflect truth, you become threatening to those who live in illusion. He didn't leave because you failed him. He left because you revealed him. So now you must ask yourself, do you want him back? Not the man you imagined, but the man he truly is. The man who ran. The man who could not hold you in your entirety. The man who touched your body but not your soul. And if the answer is no, let it be a sacred no. Let it echo in your blood, in your bones, in the breath you now reclaim. Let it close the chapter, not in bitterness, but in deep, holy reverence. Because some endings are not loss. They are liberation. You were never meant to remain in a love that required you to abandon yourself. And now that you know who you are, now that you've met the parts of yourself that held the grief, carried the shame, danced with the madness, you no longer chase men. You call in kings. Not saviors, not boys in adult bodies, not half-present hearts, but men who have done their own descent, who have kissed their own darkness, who have faced their own mothers in their dreams and stopped projecting her onto every woman they meet. You don't want the man who left you for the third person. You want the man who left her to return to himself. Only then can he meet a woman like you. Until then, you rise, alone, glorious, unapologetic. You rise not in defiance, but in alignment. You rise not to prove your worth, but because you have remembered it. And from that place, something shifts. Not just in your world, but in your energy. You no longer tolerate breadcrumbs. You no longer over-explain. You no longer wait to be loved. You are love. And that is what he could not meet. The dance between love and shadow is the oldest dance there is. It moves silently beneath the surface of every relationship, waiting to be acknowledged or ignored until it consumes. He loved the third person because she stirred the shadow parts of him that his wife had long since buried beneath kindness, routine, and obligation. She was the sudden storm that shook the foundations, the wildfire that threatened to consume the old wood. But she was also a mirror, reflecting what he refused to see within himself. The fractured boy who never fully grew up, the man who avoided the dark corridors of his own soul, the seeker lost in desire, without direction. And she, no matter her name, her face, her promises, was never the true answer. She was a symptom of a deeper wound, a wound that began long before either woman entered his life. That wound was the absence of self-love, the denial of wholeness, the refusal to look into the abyss and claim the fragmented parts waiting to be integrated. You, the wife left behind, are both the container of his shadow and the potential alchemist who can transform pain into power. But transformation cannot be forced. It begins with surrender, not to him, but to yourself. You must release the illusion that his love is the measure of your worth. You must step beyond the trap of needing him to validate your existence. Because no man can love the full truth of a woman who denies her own shadow. The woman who loves herself fully, shadows and all, becomes irresistible, not because she chases, but because she radiates a fierce, unyielding light. This light is not born from the approval of others. It is forged in solitude, in shadow work, in the sacred act of facing every scar and calling it beauty. The third person may have stolen his body, his time, his attention, but she can never steal his soul. And you, if you choose, can claim that soul by stepping into your own wildness, your own mystery, your own divine feminine power. Because the heart that truly loves does not fracture in betrayal. It breaks open. It breaks open to wisdom, to freedom, to rebirth. And when you break open, you stop being the woman who waits at the door. You become the woman who walks through it, into a life that no longer depends on the man who could not hold her. The wound he left will heal, not because you forgot, but because you forgave. Not because you returned, but because you rose. And in rising, you reclaim the deepest truth, that love is not possession, not sacrifice, not survival. Love is freedom. The freedom to be whole, the freedom to be fierce, the freedom to choose yourself above all else. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.